Hello, everyone. This is Ace McManamy.
I'm George Wade, Mohammed.
And this is actually going to be the last podcast of our series. We absolutely loved having it. And I think, George, that, with all the tools and information that our listeners have gained through this, to have a greater appreciation for turkey habitat management on Woodbury First Campus. And I think it's perfect that it concludes with this podcast. As this podcast this is what it's all about, just for Woodbury's campus. Now, you see on this video, it's different than the other videos in that it's not just a black screen, since the podcast, but this one's actually going to, you're going to have to pay attention, I guess, to this map for a little bit. It's not complicated at all. We try to keep it super simple. We've got 5 boxes, and if you notice, boxes 1 and 2, we just kept those the same from the video, so not to cause any confusion. But you're going to see 3 different boxes here. The black box, that's box 3. The yellow box, which is box 4, and the pink box. Sorry, I sounded a little colorblind there for a second. The pink box, number 5. Now you're definitely asking now, what are these boxes for? And that's what George and I are going to talk to you about. So the boxes 1 and 2, of course, are 2 areas that George and I actually believe to be pretty close to as good as it can get on Woodbury's campus right now. Box 1 probably being the best, as right next to a river, next to an open field, a farmed field, and a lot of cover. We've talked about that in the video, but box 2 is one that shows a lot of potential because of the pine forest right there. And, this pine forest actually does need some help, and it would take a big crew and not much time. Actually, you go in there and remove a lot of this overgrowth. Now, the overgrowth that George and I have 100% documented in that forest is some of the mustard seed, as well as some English ivy, and then tons of overgrowth.
Yeah.
And both. There's definitely some other invasive species in there, but also some native species that are just overgrown and need to be removed.
Definitely.
Sorry. To allow for turkeys to move around and be able to see what's going on around them. But now the boxes 3, 4, and 5 are actually brand new to y'all. So now we're going to explaining it. So box 3 is an area, actually no one really goes over there. The only time I've ever been over there on campus is actually in my forestry class doing a timber project. George, have you ever been over there before this project?
Not really, no.
Yeah, no one really goes over there, and that's actually a good sign, that no one goes over there. But in box 3, what it does not have is it does not have a lot of English ivy, which is really nice. Not having a lot of this English ivy is a blessing for this area, due to the fact that English ivy, it takes a lot of effort to get rid of it all, because you just leave a little bit and it's going to come back and grow back with a vengeance. Yeah. And George and I didn't see any mustard seed over there either, which is great. What we did see, though, is a lot of old growth. This can be good and bad. Good just because, some of these old hardwoods, for example, those are great for a forest. There's also a lot of, dead trees, which would be a prime roosting habitat for some of these turkeys. But what can also happen in an area like this is that, there's just a lot of overgrowth. We're going to use that word a lot in this podcast today, but it's necessary because it's hard for turkeys to move around in an area like such, just because they really can't see what's going on. Hard for them to just walk around. That's not just turkeys. We've said this before. We'll say it again. You're not just managing for turkeys. You're managing to restore the habitat to what it was. What that does is it brings back a lot of native species, just because you're like, all right, this is how it's supposed to be. And so a proposed idea for a project out here would actually be, what you would want to do is there's actually a nice couple of trails if you like immediately past the track, there's a little path. You can take the little path right there, and there's a couple paths. And a proposed plan would be to drive a flatbed or any kind of truck, then enter through there, and then from there, it's hard to tell exactly how forest will be next year. But what we do know it has, it's got a lot of vines in some areas that could definitely be taken out, as well as some dead limbs just hanging all around, and some dead trees that really aren't adding a lot to the environment. Not some of these long, tall, dead trees that not only for turkeys, but we were talking about Indiana bat habitat. That's also another habitat. These really big dead trees, but some areas you're just like, oh, that's all it is really cluttering up the forest in a sense. And really what you do there is you would have your truck outside, and then you'd go in and you just clean it up by hand, meaning pants, work boots of some kind, and gloves, and then probably some clippers of some sort. Really it doesn't have to be perfect.
Clippers or a shovel, honestly, you can dig some of that. Especially whenever it's kind of like a tree type invasive species, something like that.
Some tree of heaven or princess tree.
Especially, like Luke was saying, you really want to, especially when they're young and they're saplings, you really just want to dig that out and kind of get it out because it'll stop that spread of, especially in very distinct areas. It'll just stop completely the spread. But go on, whatever.
Yeah, George's making a good point there. Finding that if you can catch it at the sapling stage, it's a lot better than catching an adult. And the problem is that, somewhat like turkeys, is that these invasive tree species grow very quickly.
Yeah. And they spread quickly as well.
They do, and that's a problem. So get rid of that. Now I think that Area 3 would actually be the best area to start at. You kind of learn how to get going. It's a pretty easy area to get into. Now, moving over to the yellow box number 4, I try to draw it in there kind of behind the dining hall. And if you go behind the dining hall, you're going to find this big valley. If you use that road behind the dining hall, you can just walk down the hill and use that road and go down to the actual proper trail, which is you're kind of walking towards the art building, the proper kind of trail to the science building. You're going down, you're going to have this one building on your right. I actually don't know what that building used to be used for. Mr. Afrani didn't either when we were in a forestry class, but you're going to see a lot of Tree of Heaven through there. And Tree of Heaven is it's one of the worst species because of how quickly it grows. And what it really does is it shuts out any opportunity for any of these native species to grow up because they grow so quickly. And they take all the sunlight.
It really is the number one competitor with any old tree, old growth tree. It can spread so quickly that it just takes everything over.
Yeah, it's very good at dropping its seeds and pollinating. George, we were talking about food in our last podcast. What turkeys like to eat, which is pretty much anything, but not this.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to go eat some invasive species because, like we were saying, turkeys, they don't really live long, although they're very smart, but everything everything they do, it's built into them. It's not going to be like some of these creatures that live 40, 50 years that have all this time to learn that maybe you can actually eat some of this stuff. They're not going to do that, They're not going to mess with any of these invasive species, nor any other native species. Which is very sad, and that's not just mammals either, or not mammals, birds, insects, all sorts of creatures, and it just really does some damage to all the plant life. But going in there and removing is going to be a much bigger pain than we're going to have to do in box 3. I mean, George, can you kind of explain how the guys would go down there and kind of remove these princess trees?
In which box?
Box 4, sorry.
Yeah, there's not really an exact route to getting down there.
Yeah, I think like when there's that road behind the dining hall.
Yeah.
and then you can keep going, and then there's like the art. You go towards the art building. You don't get really near it, but there's like a path. But that path is kind of, you're not gonna be able to bring a truck right next to it.
You're gonna have to. I guess really
it's gonna be a lot of manual dragging the stuff back
you're
up.
Just taking. I mean, just the bags like we use for torches to make, or or just a trash bag or something like that. You really just gonna have to, pick that, whatever it is, the English ivy or the mustard or
The tree of heaven.
the tree of heaven. Really, whatever it is, you're just gonna have to kind of pick it up and bag it and just kind of bag them out and come back down and just keep bagging them out. Which I mean, that is a good thing to do. But, it just is a little more time consuming, especially.
This one, this is the kind of, this day would be a full day event.
Yeah.
Because the amount of labor involved in removing the trees, actually, these trees, they're not going to look anything like a white oak, with a big trunk and really, really tall. But they are still a pain, and the only way to truly remove them is to get the roots out.
Yeah.
If you don't get the root out, it's just going to regrow. And unlike removing, unlike a burn for certain areas, and there is actually another a possible solution to removing these trees, and that is to kind of stump them and then spray some kind of pesticide. Now that may sound great and easy, but there's two problems with this. First one, of course, is it actually does not work as well as just going right to the roots. I know it's a lot easier, but it's just not going to work as well. It's not going to have the same success rate. Now, the success rate's high, but it's not the same. But the bigger, more pressing issue is that this area that I have shown is right next to the river. And, I think I brought this up once before, is that I did for the second half of my STS, I was in marine biology with Mr. Mills, and shout out Mr. Mills.
Shout out
Mr. Mills. And we were talking about, I got to do the first half because of senior distinction, but the effects of Roundup on zebrafish embryos, and the effects were rather scary. It doesn't take that much to kill the embryos, and then cause a lot of mutations, such as mutations of the spine. And I don't if something can kill a tree so easily, I don't even want to think about what it can do to some of the aquatic species. I love to fish. I love going to the river. I wouldn't want some harmful pesticide running off into the river. So that is definitely not an option. Although, you'll read about it, but it's just not a viable option.
It just depends. Just depends. You just gotta, if you're gonna go take that route, you need to for sure 100% know the weather completely and know that it's not gonna rain for at least a week or so, or maybe even more than that, because. Especially with the hill and the valleys going down to the river. That with the rain, and if you do that, it's just going to go.
It'd be totally different.
Straight down to the river.
Yeah, I think it'd be totally different if you were in a flatter area, such as Area 3, Box 3. I think that's a totally different area.
Yeah, and there's just nothing, no water source.
There's really no water source.
There's just nothing there. But, even though, we have the same problem with like one, you've got just small little creeks that run off through the cow pastures. That it can get to those little creeks, and it can be very, very harmful to not just the pasture itself. It can be harmful to the cows that are drinking out of those creeks. And even with the skin, it gets like a cow crosses the creek, and that pesticide or that chemicals in that creek, it'll start to irritate them, and that just causes infections and diseases to start passing, and that's just not something we want to do. That's why hands-on manual labor is what we think
is actually the best.
The most beneficial thing for Woodbury habitat restoration.
Also, it's a great way to get service hours. But
now
we're going to which some of our friends are struggling with right now.
Yeah.
Now we're going to box number 5, and box number 5, I have it stretching this part of the river, but you could really draw it along all parts of the river. But here it's really concentrated. And through this area, you're going to see a lot of this mustard seed. And Mustard seed's pretty easy to pick out once you find it. You can kind of see sometimes they have these like little white flowering bulbs on them. When you go down there, we're at the very end of this. We're just going to run you through a list of the invasive species to really look out for. And it's best to actually have a couple pictures, screenshots on your phone. That's the best way to be able to locate them. And especially, lucky in the Rod and Gun Club, a lot of kids will have this knowledge through some of their senior courses, but go down with someone who knows what they're looking for. But in Area 5, you're going to see a lot of this mustard seed. Mustard seed is really like picking out a weed. It's really annoying, and there's a lot of it. The problem with this is that, nothing really, a turkey's really not going to want to eat this because, like we said again, it's an invasive species. It's not something that's going to be in their diet, although it grows everywhere. And what that does, it kind of takes a lot of the ground space that may have been previously occupied by a lot of native species, which is just unfortunate. Because not only the turkeys that are hurting, it's all other creatures such as deer and, a lot of others. Now, you may be thinking, why don't we, if it's just something like a weed, why can't we just use a pesticide? And it's for the same exact reason that I just said before about box number 4, the yellow box, is that, it's right next to the river. It's on a slope. You spray it, high chance through the rain or, I don't know. There's never really no irrigation there, so it'd go through the rain. It happened because of the rain. Rain kind of washes it down in the river, ends up in the river, flows to the rest of the Rapidan. Do not want that to happen, so you're just gonna have to put in that work.
Yeah, one other thing I was just mentioning, about this chemical or pesticide getting into the river. I mean, there's plenty of people that use the Rapidan River as an irrigation source to their crops, and when say Roundup or something got into the Rapidan and somebody was using a pump to irrigate, I mean, that's just going to kill the person's crop completely. I mean, so it's not just about the marine life and everything like that. They could be, hurt by this. It's also people who use that as, irrigation, or people that, I don't know, just anything like that in general.
Right. That's why, you talked about Luke saying, you're managing for the habitat, not for the species. And he couldn't have said it any better, because if you're actually truly managing for the habitat, not species, you're going to be thinking about all of the possible side effects of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what George and I feel like we're trying to do a good job of, and that's because of Mr. Afrani, our teacher. What he's taught us is, you got to think about all the repercussions of what you're doing. And spraying pesticides is one that, you really just don't want to do, because it can harm. It's going to probably end up in the long run doing more harm than it can actually help. And another way is, if you're actually doing the manual labor, you're going to have you're going to have a greater respect for the area, because you're the one actually doing the work. Yeah, what that does is, one, I have a feeling that you're going to be much more in tune with the habitat, and you're going to have a much greater understanding for it and what turkeys want and what they need. Now, it would be wonderful if we could just do a controlled burn, but that's obviously not in the cards. So that's why George and I have kind of set this map up for here. We hope this map's a little helpful for you. And the hopes is that these areas, once you manage them in the year to come, that they become the best areas to hunt. Now, kind of just like a little run through, a list of these invasive species that to look out for. Mustard seed's one. That's a big one. That's just kind of everywhere. And then English ivy is actually one that I think is some of the worst on Woodbury's campus, because of its ability to actually choke out a current just living tree. It's kind of incredible to watch. And then you moved the tree of heaven. Tree of heaven, it's horrible. George and I already talked about that, because of how big it can get. It has kind of fernish leaves, I guess that's how you would call it. You look up a picture, you'll see it with kind of some like pink looking flowering things. The furnished kind of leaf. It's an odd looking tree. It does come from Asia. Most invasive species do, and there's princess tree. Princess tree is gonna have these massive looking leaves. They're not gonna be. It's not gonna be as big of a tree as tree of heaven typically. Princess tree is also called Polywana. Yeah, Polywana. Yeah, those are kind of the, I guess you'd say, the big four you're looking out for. You remove all those, although it'll take some time, but through hard work and perseverance, it can definitely happen. And for these turkeys to return back to campus. Now, George, of course, and I hope that you've really enjoyed our podcast, and we've really enjoyed our time, and we hope that our time's not been spent in vain, and that y'all actually listening to this, take this and run with it, so that I want to come back and my 5-year reunion and hear about all the turkeys being shot. That would make my day. That would just be amazing to hear.
Or even just to see what areas have really changed and transformed that habitat into a real life turkey habitat, and it's just something that we hope to look forward to, and we just hope the future of this can keep going and moving in the right direction, and we hope we can get that help through the Ride and Gun Club, and it's just something we hope
for years to come
to see.
Yeah. Well, we thank you so much for listening in. This is our last podcast. We've absolutely enjoyed doing this Senior Distinction Project. Hope we made somewhat of an impact. George, I think it's kind of cool that, I guess the goal of ours, and I think hopefully we'll accomplish it, is that, we brought in Luke Hutchinson, who graduated. He was a senior our freshman year, and now we're passing on something that, the freshmen currently can hear, and kids that come in after them will be able to hear, which I think is pretty interesting.
Definitely.
You've got this YouTube account. George and I were actually thinking of doing a paper or putting the podcast in Apple Podcasts, but YouTube we found is actually the best way for something to be long lasting. We do have an email on that YouTube account, but I can tell you right now, I'm never going to check that email. I just made it for the podcast, but I will leave my phone number. If you ever want to talk about it, I think it'd be kind of cool to get a call in a couple of years, being like, hey.
Yeah.
My phone number is 912-655-6336, and if you ever want to reach out, please do. I'd love to talk to you, text with you just about it. Thank you so much. We've absolutely enjoyed it.
Yep. Thank you.